We know that Utah's abortion laws are confusing, and a lot's changed in the last few years. The important thing to know is that abortion is still legal up to 18 weeks in Utah, but that's at risk, and in this video series, we're going to tell you why. For many years, abortion was legal and protected because of Roe v. Wade. Utah lawmakers would try to ban it, but those laws did not stand up in court because Roe v. Wade protected the right to an abortion in the U.S. However, Utah lawmakers did pass numerous restrictions that made it more difficult to get an abortion. Then, in 2020, the Utah legislature passed the trigger ban, a law that bans nearly all abortions and criminalizes healthcare providers. But there was a twist. To prevent an immediate lawsuit, this 2020 law had a trigger clause, which meant that it couldn't go into effect unless it was triggered by the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. Many people thought that would never happen, but now we know. Everything changed in the summer of 2022 when the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Up until that point, abortion was a protected right in our Constitution, but with the overturning of Roe and the Dobbs decision, that right was taken away. That ruling also meant that Utah's trigger law was triggered, and it went into effect banning nearly all abortions in Utah temporarily. The very next day, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, the ACLU of Utah, and Planned Parenthood Federation of America filed a lawsuit saying that the trigger ban violated the Utah Constitution. A judge agreed to grant an injunction, which is a pause, which blocks that law from going into effect while the court case proceeded. The law has been blocked ever since, and abortion has remained legal and available up to 18 weeks in Utah. But this ruling and injunction is really at the beginning of a long legal process. This trigger ban was blocked by a state court just days after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Planned Parenthood Association of Utah only had to stop providing abortion care for 1 day. We won an injunction, or a pause, on the trigger ban. But the state was upset that their trigger ban was blocked by an injunction because they want abortion to be banned while the case makes its way through the courts. They appealed the injunction up to the Utah Supreme Court, where it was argued in August of 2023. Now, everyone is waiting for the Utah Supreme Court to issue a decision, which could happen next week or next year. The justices could rule that the injunction can remain in place, blocking the trigger ban and protecting abortion access in Utah, or they could allow the trigger ban to go into effect, banning nearly all abortions in Utah while the lawsuit continues. The important thing to know is that either way, this case is not over. It will still go back to the lower court for a trial to determine whether Utah's trigger ban violates the Utah Constitution. And that decision will determine the long-term future of abortion care in Utah. Now, let's talk a little bit about what could happen next. A bit of a Utah Supreme Court choose your own adventure. In option 1, the Utah Supreme Court could rule that the trigger ban can stay blocked, meaning that there would still be legal access to abortion up to 18 weeks in Utah. And when the case goes back to the lower court, the judge could rule that the ban is either unconstitutional, meaning that we would still have the right to abortion, legal abortion in Utah, or the judge could allow the trigger ban to go into effect, and that would ban almost all abortions in Utah. In option 2, the Supreme Court could strike down the injunction and the trigger ban would go into effect, banning most abortions in the state. But just like in the other option, this case still needs to go back to the lower court, where a judge could rule that the trigger ban is unconstitutional and we could resume abortion care in the state, or they could rule that the trigger ban is allowed, and that would basically mean that most abortions are illegal. If your head is spinning, we get it. It's a lot to take in. Just know that Planned Parenthood Association of Utah is going to be with you every step of the way, keeping you informed with accurate information. We will always be here for our patients, making sure that they get the care that they need. Our doors remain open, and we want to make sure that Utahns can access the kind of healthcare that they need, like access to birth control, STI testing and treatment, cervical cancer screening and treatment, vasectomies, and abortion care, as long as it's legal in Utah.